More than 50 years ago, one man posed a question that Karnataka Home Minister Priyank Kharge is asking today. His name was MD Kamdar. He was not a Congress leader. He was not a left activist. In fact, he was not even an ideological opponent of the RSS. In fact, he was an RSS man. After spending nearly 3 decades within the organization, Kamdar went to court in the 1970s and asked a simple question. What exactly is the RSS? Is it a charitable body, a religious organization, a political organization? And if it is any of these things, why is it not registered? The answers that the RSS gave during those legal battles contain some of the clearest answers to the questions being asked today. It also explains why the RSS has long resisted registering itself as an organization. To understand the controversy today, we need to go back more than half a century to Kamdar's questions and the RSS's answers, and how RSS's constitution was changed. Let me explain. Over the last few days, you've probably seen the RSS registration controversy all over television and social media. Most of the discussion has revolved around political reactions, statements, counter-statements, and sound bites. We decided to do something different. Instead of asking what politicians are saying today, we wanted to understand what the RSS itself has said over the decades when these questions came up in courts, before tax authorities, and in legal proceedings. We've also covered RSS's activities and how its affiliate organizations behave in previous episodes of Let Me Explain. Of course, the links are in the description below. If you value this kind of reporting that goes beyond the headlines, then do consider supporting the show. You can contribute any amount of your choice by scanning the QR code and help us spend more time researching stories like these and bringing them to you. Here's also a reminder to let you know that LME has gotten closer to you. We have a WhatsApp channel where we put behind the scene visuals, also the explainers that didn't make it to the final video, and updates on our previous videos. We are trying to build a community where going forward we'll have a lot more content on the channel. If you like our work and if you want to engage with us more closely, then scan this QR code and follow our WhatsApp channel. Now let's go back more than 50 years to a man named MD Kamdar. The RSS was founded in 1925. But it's unclear if it had a proper constitution from the beginning. While some say yes, others say no. And because of its secretive nature, no one has ever published a copy of its constitution, if it even existed. That changed only after Mahatma Gandhi's assassination and the subsequent ban imposed on the RSS in 1948. One of the conditions laid down by Deputy Prime Minister, who was also the Home Minister, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, for lifting the ban on RSS was to adopt a formal written constitution. The government wanted clarity. What was the organization's objectives? How was it structured? And what were the rules? Who exercised authority within the organization? The constitution that emerged described the RSS as a cultural organization devoted to organizing the Hindu society and promoting national service and character building. It said the Sangh as such had no politics and is devoted to purely cultural work. Individual Swayamsevaks may join political parties that do not indulge in violence or act secretly. In short, the document that the RSS later relied upon in legal proceedings was born from a demand for transparency and accountability by the Indian state. The story of how the RSS was challenged begins with an unlikely figure. Dr. MD Kamdar was an RSS man. According to records discussed by legal scholar A.G. Nurani, Kamdar was associated with the RSS for roughly 30 years. In 1972, Kamdar approached the Charity Commissioner in Nagpur and argued that the RSS should be registered as a public trust under the Bombay Public Trust Act. If the RSS was recognized as a public trust, it would be subject to greater scrutiny, regulation, and accountability. The organization resisted. In 1974, Deputy Charity Commissioner V.P. Bahare ruled in favor of the RSS. He held that the RSS was not required to register as a public trust because its objectives were closer to patriotic objectives than charitable or religious ones. Now think about this for a moment. The organization that publicly described itself as cultural in its constitution was in legal proceedings being treated as something like a political body. Kamdar appealed. In 1978, Joint Charity Commissioner M.S. Vaidya reversed the earlier ruling. He declared that the RSS was a public, religious and charitable trust. The RSS appealed against Vaidya's decisions, and in their appeal, Noorani says RSS leaders argued that the RSS was neither religious nor charitable. Its objectives were cultural and patriotic, and these objectives were akin to political purposes. Among the most revealing sections of the appeal were descriptions of RSS festivals and rituals. The appeal explained that events such as Hindu Samrajya Din, Vijay Dashmi and other celebrations were intended to inspire Swayamsevaks with the dream of a Hindu Rashtra. Even Guru Purnima, a major RSS observance, was described in explicitly political terms. The appeal argued that the ceremony centered on the Bhagwa Dhwaj, that is a saffron flag. Not because of religious worship, but because the flag symbolized the Hindu Rashtra. So I've told you how the RSS was arguing before charity authorities that it was not charitable. But at the same time, another battle was unfolding, this time with the Income Tax Department. And here, according to A.G. Noorani's analysis of the records, the organization adopted a very different position. The RSS sought exemptions available to charitable and educational institutions. In other words, while resisting classification as a public charitable trust in one forum, it was simultaneously arguing for charitable status in another. Now, income tax officials were unconvinced. One officer concluded that since RSS's work to rejuvenate the Hindu society involved political questions, the RSS could not automatically be regarded as a purely charitable institution. Eventually, some of these battles reached the Patna High Court. In 1994, the High Court said that Guru Dakshina collected in 2 assessment years, that's 1967-68 and 1975-76, were exempt from taxes on the principles of mutuality, the money collected by members for a shared non-commercial purpose. Now, even as these legal battles were on, the RSS amended its constitution in 1972. No one knows fully what these changes were, but a few have been recorded by Noorani and others. The RSS constitution originally stated that gifts, donations and offerings received by branches would form part of the Sangh funds. After the amendment, the wordings changed. Guru Dakshina, that's the annual contribution made by Swayamsevaks, was specifically linked to individual shakas. The practical effect was very important. The RSS argued that each shaka was financially independent. There was no central ownership structure. Now, why was the constitution changed? Perhaps to be in line with the principle of mutuality, which would enable RSS representatives to argue that individual shakas were separate entities. Now see this building? This is Keshav Kunj, the Delhi headquarters of the RSS, apparently built at a cost of 150 crore rupees, money that's collected from volunteers. In her investigation, The RSS Does Not Exist for the Caravan, journalist Amrita Singh found how money for this building came through Shri Keshav Smarak Samiti, a society registered under the Societies Act. India has no general statute that compels every voluntary association to register as a society, trust or company. The RSS says Article 19(1)(c) of the Indian Constitution guarantees the right to form associations. which means citizens can associate informally for social, cultural, religious, or political reasons. V. Venkatesan, a senior journalist, wrote in the Frontline that the RSS can choose to remain in an unregistered voluntary association. And it is not obligatory for them to respond to Kharge's letter. But he also says that even though Article 19(1)(c) does allow the RSS to form an association, the article does not make the RSS above all laws. It has to answer to a competent authority like the tax authority if demanded. And this is where the RSS's structure comes in. An unregistered body can function from a building made for 150 crore rupees because it has created an opaque system of organizations all around it. These organizations are all registered as societies, trusts, etc. and pool in money while the RSS keeps pointing to the Patna ruling to claim exemption. RSS leaders argued in 1978 itself that the organization may change its policy and participate in political activity, even become a political party. The RSS of today may not be officially a political party, but it is very much part of the government in many ways. And it also aids the BJP in elections through various affiliated organizations. It's no longer a small voluntary association operating on the margins of public life. The network extends across the country and even beyond. Registration would provide greater transparency regarding finances, governance structures, decision-making, and institutional responsibilities. And if the RSS is confident in the legitimacy of its work, it's difficult to see why transparency should be resisted. Look, the legal disputes that we've discussed today are not new discoveries. They've been part of the public record for decades now. If the legal ambiguities surrounding the RSS are so significant, why did the Congress not do anything before this? That does not, of course, invalidate the questions that are being asked today, but it does also raise an uncomfortable question for the Congress itself.